HOA President Karen Deborah slid an official letter under my door. Your 15 acres will host our annual barbecue this Saturday. No permission, no signature, not even a knock. Just her smug HOA seal stamped across my property rights. I smiled and swung the gates wide open. 10 charter buses roared in, diesel engines rumbling like thunder. 400 confused guests poured out onto my lawn. Catering trucks blocked the entire street. Karen strutted across my property in designer stilettos, megaphone blaring, bragging to local news crews about finally taming the difficult neighbor, while thick diesel exhaust choked the sweet barbecue smoke. Then came the sound I'd been dreaming of for months. Click. The electronic gate locked with a cold, final snap, trapping every soul inside. She had no clue I'd been building a felony trespassing case with lawyers, hidden cameras, and time-stamped proof. Now 400 unwilling witnesses watched her confess on live television. Moments before, police cuffed her manicured hands, designer heels scraping against gravel as they dragged her away. What would you do if your HOA tried stealing your land? Drop your city below. Let's expose these power-hungry tyrants together. Let me take you back to where this whole nightmare started. My name's Jake Morrison, and at 54, I'd spent 30 years crawling through cramped apartment electrical panels, dreaming of wide-open spaces. When my Uncle Eddie passed and left me his life savings, $180,000 he'd scraped together working construction, I knew exactly what to do. I bought 15.2 acres of pure Texas freedom in Cypress County, right on the edge of the Willowbrook subdivision. The fresh pine scent from new fence posts I was installing mixed with the crunch of gravel under moving truck tires, creating this perfect soundtrack of independence. Finally, my own workshop, my own vegetable garden, my own slice of peace. The property survey was crystal clear. I was 200 feet outside any HOA jurisdiction, completely free. That lasted exactly 48 hours. Day 2, I'm drilling fence post holes when expensive tires crunch up my driveway. Out rolls this white Cadillac Escalade with vanity plates reading HOA Boss, because apparently subtlety died with the dinosaurs. Out steps Karen Deborah Wyndham like she owns the place, which, as I'd soon learn, she genuinely believed she did. Picture this woman, 59 years old, HOA president for 9 consecutive years, real estate agent who uses her HOA position to generate leads. She's carrying this leather portfolio like it's the Constitution, and sporting a smile so fake it could be mass-produced in China. The taste of metallic dust from my drilling lingers as she clicks across my property in designer heels, each step deliberate as a conquering general. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Jake," she chirps. "I'm Karen, and you're going to love being part of our community. Not if you want to join. Not would you like to consider. You're going to love it. Like resistance isn't even an option." Then comes the portfolio. HOA covenant packet. $250 joining fee, plus 180 monthly dues. For property that isn't even in her jurisdiction. "We need unity," she says, that plastic smile never wavering. "Your property impacts our neighborhood visual standards. Mavericks hurt everyone's property values." I pull out my property survey, spread it on my truck tailgate. "Ma'am, I'm clearly outside your HOA boundaries. 200 feet past your jurisdiction, according to county records." The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Her voice turned sharp as broken glass. "Geography is just paperwork, honey. We'll fix that." And there it was. The sound of suburban lawnmowers humming beyond my fence line suddenly felt ominous instead of peaceful. Texas Property Code 202.001 states that HOA covenants only apply to properties explicitly included in the original subdivision plat recorded with the county. Always verify your property's actual HOA status with official county records, not neighbor claims. Week 1 brought anonymous noise complaints. Apparently using a circular saw at 1 p.m. on Tuesday violates noise ordinances in Karen's fantasy world. Week 2, a concerned citizen reported my illegal electrical business because I helped neighbor Derek jumpstart his car. Week 3, code enforcement arrived about my unsightly vegetables, disrupting neighborhood aesthetics. This wasn't random complaints. This was systematic warfare designed to break my will. But here's what Karen didn't know about electricians. We're natural problem solvers. We trace circuits, find the source, and fix it permanently. 30 years of dealing with difficult customers taught me to spot patterns, document everything, and always have backup plans. The smell of fresh cedar mulch around my vegetable garden was starting to smell like victory. Because if Karen wanted to wage war against a retired electrician with time, money, and 3 decades of troubleshooting experience, She was about to learn why you never mess with someone who knows exactly how to cut power to your entire operation. Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her HOA career. She'd picked a fight with someone who understood that the best defense against a bully is a perfectly executed counterattack. Month 1, Karen launched what I now call the parking siege. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., her white Escalade would roll up and park halfway across my driveway, not technically blocking it. Oh no, Karen was too smart for that, but positioned perfectly to force me onto my own grass every time I wanted to leave. When I politely asked her to move it the first time, she flashed that plastic smile and said, "It's a public street, Jake. Everyone has parking rights. Maybe you should join the HOA to get parking priority." The audacity was breathtaking. She was essentially holding my driveway hostage to force me into her little kingdom. Within a week, she'd recruited 3 HOA board members to join her rotation. There was always someone parked just inconveniently enough to make my life difficult. From 6 in the morning until 10 at night, they'd coordinate through text messages, treating my property access like some kind of military operation. The hot asphalt radiated heat upward as cars idled during their strategy meetings, and I could hear them through my security cameras discussing my antisocial behavior and suspicious activities. Apparently, working in my own workshop made me a threat to neighborhood safety. Karen even took to Nextdoor, posting about neighbors who think they own the streets and antisocial property owners who refuse community cooperation. The comment section became her personal echo chamber, with HOA loyalists chiming in about property values and community standards. Now, most people would have just accepted this harassment or maybe filed a complaint that would disappear into bureaucratic limbo. But 30 years troubleshooting electrical problems had taught me something valuable. When there's an issue, you research the specifications, follow the code requirements, and document everything meticulously. I remembered a customer years back who'd gotten his contractor in trouble over improper electrical clearances. Turned out municipal codes are way more specific than most people realize. So I spent one evening researching parking ordinances and, sure enough, found the golden ticket. City Ordinance March 7th, 14 required all parked vehicles to maintain at least 4 feet of clearance from residential driveway approaches. Karen's power play was actually illegal. I grabbed my measuring tape and timestamp camera app. Karen's Escalade, 3 feet 2 inches from my driveway approach. Board member Patricia's Honda, 2 feet 8 inches. Treasurer Randy's pickup truck, 3 feet 1 inch. Every single vehicle was in violation. Filing formal complaints with parking enforcement felt like Christmas morning. I provided GPS coordinates, photographic evidence, and exact measurements for each violation. Within 12 days, Karen had accumulated 8 parking tickets at $85 each. That's $680 in fines for her little power game. The sound of parking enforcement officers writing tickets became the new neighborhood alarm clock. And let me tell you, there's something deeply satisfying about watching someone's illegal intimidation tactics cost them real money. But here's where Karen made the mistake that would ultimately destroy her. Instead of backing down, she doubled down in the most spectacular way possible. She organized what she called neighborhood watch meetings. Every Tuesday evening, 12 to 15 people would gather in the street directly in front of my house, claiming they were discussing community safety concerns. From my electrician days, I knew Texas was a one-party consent state for recording conversations, so my security cameras were capturing every word. What they were actually doing was planning harassment strategies. I recorded Karen saying, "We need to make life so uncomfortable that he begs to join the HOA just for peace." Another board member suggested filing more code violations, and someone else proposed spreading rumors about me being a dangerous loner. They were literally conspiring to harass me into submission, on public property, where I could legally record every single word. The irony was perfect. Karen's escalation from individual harassment to organized conspiracy had just handed me evidence of coordinated criminal behavior. Her need for control had made her sloppy, and now I had documentation that would make any prosecutor's day. Meanwhile, the neighborhood dynamics were shifting in ways Karen hadn't anticipated. Maria Santos, a 73-year-old widow, started bringing me homemade tamales and quietly expressing support. Derek and Emma Sage, the young couple with a newborn, were afraid to pick sides publicly, but clearly sympathetic. Most importantly, Frank Rodriguez, a retired sheriff's deputy, had started taking very obvious notes during Karen's street meetings. The smell of Maria's cooking spices drifting across the evening air during those Tuesday harassment sessions created this surreal contrast. Homemade kindness versus manufactured hostility, all playing out under the Texas sunset. Karen thought she was tightening the noose around my independence. What she was actually doing was building a felony conspiracy case against herself while inadvertently organizing the very community support I'd need for the war ahead. Sometimes the best strategy against a bully is just letting them dig their own hole deeper while you document every shovelful of dirt. And Karen? She was about to grab a much bigger shovel. Karen's parking ticket humiliation should have been a wake-up call, but instead, it triggered something genuinely sinister. She'd crossed from annoying neighbor into full criminal territory. It started with midnight reconnaissance missions. My motion sensors would ping at 11:47 p.m., and there was Karen's Escalade creeping along my fence line. She'd park across the street and walk my perimeter with a flashlight, testing gate latches and photographing security camera angles like she was planning a military operation. Night 2 brought a measuring tape. She actually spray-painted my trees for tent positioning, treating my property like her personal event venue. The woman was planning her barbecue invasion with tactical precision, and apparently my consent was just a minor obstacle to overcome. Night 3 escalated to breaking and entering. I watched through 4K cameras as Karen crept toward my utility shed with bolt cutters, attempting to steal my tables and chairs for her unauthorized party. The grinding sound of metal against metal echoed across my property at 2 a.m. Every electrician instinct told me to confront her immediately, but I'd learned something valuable from 30 years of troubleshooting. Sometimes you let the short circuit complete itself before intervening because that's when you see the real damage. When Derek's dog started barking, Karen fled, but not before my cameras captured perfect evidence of attempted burglary. The next morning, I deployed a strategy I'd learned from dealing with electrical inspectors who tried to intimidate contractors: create an unbreakable paper trail. First certified letter demanded fence repair payment with video evidence attached. Second letter was a cease and desist copied to the entire HOA board. Third notice informed Karen that all future interactions would be recorded for legal purposes. Each letter sent certified mail, each signature required, each piece building an ironclad legal foundation. But here's where Karen made her biggest tactical error. Instead of retreating, she doubled down by filing a false police report. She claimed I'd threatened her during a property line discussion that never happened, trying to flip the narrative and make me the aggressor. When officers arrived to investigate, I smiled and invited them to review my security footage. Not only was there no threatening encounter, but the cameras clearly showed Karen attempting to break into my shed with bolt cutters at 2 a.m. The officers warned Karen about filing false reports and suggested she reconsider her approach to neighborhood relations. Watching a 59-year-old real estate agent get lectured by police about basic law was deeply satisfying, but the real victory was watching her credibility crumble in real time. That evening, Randy Kowalski appeared at my door looking like a man carrying a terrible secret. Randy had been HOA treasurer for 15 years, quietly watching Karen's increasingly authoritarian behavior with growing alarm. The aroma of fresh coffee filled my kitchen as we sat at my dining table and Randy nervously spread out financial documents like he was defusing a bomb. "Jake," he whispered, glancing toward the window. "Karen's been stealing from us for years." The contractor invoices made my electrician brain immediately spot the problems. Landscaping bills 40% above market rate for work that looked suspiciously like Karen's personal yard maintenance. Emergency repairs with no board approval and inflated pricing. Most damning, recurring payments to Wyndham Property Management LLC, Karen's side business that no HOA board had ever authorized. "She's been forging my signature on checks," Randy admitted, hands trembling. "I've suspected for months, but I could never prove it alone. I think she's stolen over $30,000. From electrical work, I knew that finding one code violation usually meant 10 more were hiding behind the walls. Randy wasn't just offering evidence of embezzlement. He was handing me the key to Karen's entire criminal enterprise. "Randy," I said, refilling his coffee, "how do you feel about requesting a complete forensic audit of HOA finances?" His relieved smile told me everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior became increasingly unhinged. She organized intimidation campaigns, pressuring elderly residents to sign petitions demanding my cooperation. She threatened Derek and Emma that property values would collapse if her barbecue was canceled. She created fake social media accounts spreading rumors about my dangerous behavior. Most telling, she started conducting surveillance, parking across the street for hours just staring at my house. Frank Rodriguez, the retired deputy, documented these sessions and admitted they'd crossed from harassment into stalking territory. The taste of impending victory mixed with the evening aroma of Maria's cooking as I realized Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was completely unraveling. Her desperation had pushed her into multiple felonies, and now we had witnesses documenting her psychological breakdown. Randy's financial evidence was the ammunition we needed, but Karen's escalating criminal behavior was gift-wrapping the case for us. Sometimes the best strategy is giving your enemy enough rope to hang themselves. Karen was practically braiding her own noose. Karen's desperation reached new heights when she decided to weaponize the entire county bureaucracy against me. If intimidation wouldn't work, she'd try to bury me under an avalanche of false official complaints. Monday morning, a bewildered code enforcement officer arrived with 14 separate violations, all filed by D. Wyndham. The list read like fiction. A 40-foot storage container blocking drainage easements, illegal dumping operations, commercial vehicle storage, unpermitted structures, noise violations for using power tools during legal daytime hours. The inspector spent 2 hours wandering my property, scratching his head. "Sir, I'm supposed to find a massive shipping container right here," he said, pointing at my tomato plants. "And according to this report, you're running some kind of illegal waste disposal operation." I gestured toward my compost bin. "Well, if decomposing banana peels constitute hazardous waste, you got me." After documenting the complete absence of any actual violations, the inspector apologized and left, but not before muttering about people who waste taxpayer resources with fantasy complaints. That's when I remembered something from my electrical days. Bureaucrats absolutely hate having their time wasted, and there are legal consequences for filing false official reports. I'd once seen a contractor get prosecuted for filing bogus safety complaints against a competitor. I immediately filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all complaint records. Texas requires agencies to fulfill these within 10 business days, and when the documents arrived, they revealed Karen's systematic campaign of lies. Not only had she filed 14 completely fabricated violations against my property, but some described structures that didn't exist anywhere in the county. My counterattack was surgical and devastating. I filed legitimate complaints against Karen's actual violations. Her damaged fence posts, noise ordinance violations from pool parties running past 10 p.m., the accumulating parking tickets she'd never paid. Unlike Karen's fantasy reports, mine included photographic evidence, timestamps, GPS coordinates, and witness statements. Suddenly, code enforcement was visiting HOA properties instead of mine, and Karen was drowning in the bureaucratic quicksand she'd tried to dump on me. The beautiful irony was watching her false complaint strategy implode. Word spread about my FOIA discovery, and suddenly other residents started sharing their stories. Maria revealed Karen had filed false garden violations against her last year. Derek and Emma admitted they'd been afraid to let their baby play outside because Karen complained about normal infant sounds during daylight hours. Frank Rodriguez, with his cop instincts for pattern recognition, laid out a timeline that revealed the scope of Karen's operation. "Jake, look at this," he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table while the smell of Maria's evening tamales drifted through the window. "Every resident who's ever challenged her gets hit with mysterious code violations within 2 weeks. Property owners who questioned HOA expenditures faced sudden compliance issues. Families who missed HOA meetings got noise complaints. Anyone who voted against Karen's proposals found themselves drowning in bureaucratic harassment." We weren't just documenting petty tyranny. We were uncovering years of systematic abuse of official authority. But Karen's biggest mistake came when she decided to escalate from bureaucratic warfare to direct extortion. She started making house calls, pressuring residents with thinly veiled threats about property values and resale difficulties. She told elderly residents their Medicare supplements might be affected by neighborhood instability. She suggested to Derek and Emma that young families needed to support established leadership for their children's futures. Then she made the fatal error of targeting Bobby Kellerman. Bobby was a disabled veteran who'd bought his house with VA benefits after serving 2 tours in Afghanistan. When Karen knocked on his door and suggested that certain residents might find it difficult to refinance their mortgages if they didn't support community initiatives, she'd picked the wrong target. Bobby, who'd survived actual warfare, wasn't about to be intimidated by a suburban real estate agent. He recorded their entire conversation and brought it straight to me. "This psycho just threatened my mortgage eligibility because I won't sign some petition against you," Bobby said, his voice steady but furious. "She's using her real estate connections to financially threaten residents. That's not politics. That's straight-up extortion." The recording was devastating. Karen's voice, clear as day, explaining how residents who didn't cooperate with community leadership might find their property transactions more complicated due to her professional relationships in the local real estate market. She'd just confessed to felony extortion while threatening a disabled veteran's housing security. As Frank and I listened to the recording that evening, the taste of absolute victory mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee grounds. Karen's need for total control had pushed her into federal crime territory, and she'd confessed to it all on tape. We weren't building a harassment case anymore. We were documenting a criminal enterprise that could destroy her career and land her in federal prison. The financial records Randy delivered that Tuesday evening changed everything. What started as petty neighborhood harassment had just exploded into federal crime territory. Frank and I spread 3 years of HOA documents across my dining room table like homicide detectives working their biggest case. The musty smell of old paperwork mixed with the aroma of Maria's Cuban coffee as she settled in to help. 40 years of bookkeeping experience made her sharper at spotting fraud than both of us combined. Dios mío, Maria whispered, adjusting her reading glasses. This landscaping bill is $8,000. For what? Did they plant money trees? The pattern emerged like an electrical short circuit. Once you found the first problem, the whole system's corruption became obvious. Every emergency repair cost 40% above market rate. Tree trimming inflated from $800 to $1,200. Pool maintenance contracts mysteriously doubled, but the smoking gun was a series of payments to Wyndham Property Management LLC, Karen's side business that no HOA board had ever voted to authorize. Randy, look at this check signature, Frank said, his cop instincts activated. Is this how you normally sign your name? Randy's face went ashen as he studied the authorization. That's not my signature. I never approved any payment to Karen's company. She's been forging my name for months. The theft was staggering. Over 22 months, Karen had systematically stolen $31,847 from community funds. But what made my hands actually shake with rage was what Maria found next. Jake, she said, her voice tight with fury. This landscaping invoice from last April shows community beautification work at 1847 Maple Ridge Drive. My address. Karen had billed the HOA $2,400 for landscaping my property that wasn't HOA owned and had never received any services. She'd charged the community for work that never happened, on land she didn't control, for a homeowner who wasn't even a member. That's not just embezzlement, Frank said, his detective brain processing the implications. That's fraud with falsified documentation and theft by deception. But Randy's next revelation made my blood turn to ice water. There's more, he said, pulling out another folder with shaking hands. Karen's been using her HOA position to force property sales. The evidence was sickening. 3 families had been terrorized into selling below market value after Karen threatened them with endless code violations and compliance issues. Each family, desperate to escape her harassment, had hired Karen as their listing agent to expedite the process. Her commission from these extorted sales, $18,000 in protection money. She's running a goddamn protection racket, I said, the taste of bile mixing with coffee. Submit to her authority or get bureaucratically tortured until you're forced to sell anyway. Frank nodded grimly. Total theft is nearly 50 grand. That's federal RICO territory. Embezzlement, extortion, mail fraud, civil rights violations under color of authority. This woman's looking at decades in federal prison. The room fell silent except for the gentle tick of my wall clock. We weren't dealing with an overzealous HOA president anymore. We were staring at evidence of an organized criminal enterprise that had been destroying families for years. So what's our move? Randy asked, looking like someone who'd just discovered his neighbor was a serial killer. I smiled, remembering my electrical mentor's advice about complex system failures. Sometimes you have to let everything overload spectacularly before you can rebuild it properly. We let Karen commit her biggest crime yet, I said. In 3 weeks, she's planning to steal my property for her barbecue with 400 witnesses and live TV coverage. She'll confess to trespassing on camera while proving she has zero respect for property rights. The evening air carried the scent of jasmine through my open window, sweet as the justice we were about to serve. Karen thought she was planning a community barbecue. She was actually orchestrating her own public execution. The next morning's HOA newsletter hit like a legal atomic bomb. Annual Willowbrook Community Barbecue would be held at Community Green Space, 1847 Maple Ridge Drive, my property address, brazenly described as HOA-owned land, with Karen's signature authorizing everything and my consent nowhere in sight. 400 RSVPs already confirmed, catering contracts signed for $3,000, live band booked for $800, tent rentals for $1,200. Karen had blown over $5,000 of community money on an event planned for property she didn't own, creating a paper trail that would make federal prosecutors dance with joy. The audacity was stunning, but it was also perfect. She'd just documented theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit trespassing on official letterhead, signed in her own handwriting. That evening, my dining room became mission control for the most satisfying trap in HOA history. Frank arrived with evidence organization systems from his detective days, manila folders, timeline charts, and enough legal pads to choke a courthouse. The smell of Maria's homemade empanadas filled the air as she spread financial documents across my table with the precision of a surgeon preparing for heart surgery. "Aye, this woman is loca," Maria muttered, reviewing Karen's forged signatures. "But she's also stupid. Look how sloppy these fake authorizations are." Randy brought 15 years of HOA documentation that would obliterate Karen's credibility. Derek and Emma volunteered to film everything from their second-story window. Bobby Kellerman offered tactical planning from his military days. Even Mrs. Patterson, the 80-year-old retired librarian, joined our alliance with research skills that could shame a Harvard law student. "We need to think like a narcissist," Frank said, spreading aerial photos of my property. "Karen's convinced she can intimidate Jake into last-minute submission. When that fails, she'll claim emergency authority or community necessity." My attorney consultation had been illuminating. Texas property law included something most people didn't know. Owners have the right to detain trespassers until police arrive, essentially citizens' arrest authority on their own land. I'd learned this during electrical work at a warehouse where they'd caught thieves stealing copper wire. Once Karen and her 400 accomplices entered without permission, I could legally prevent them from leaving until law enforcement sorted everything out. The beauty was that Karen's own aggressive personality would make her resist, creating even more charges. The security upgrade cost $4,200, but delivered movie-quality surveillance. 12 4K cameras with night vision and crystal-clear audio throughout the property. Redundant cloud storage with real-time backup, no technical difficulties would save Karen from her own confession. Mobile alerts for motion detection meant I'd know the second her invasion began. The gate modification was pure engineering poetry. Electronic system controlled by smartphone, wide enough for charter buses but with one fatal design feature. Once closed, it could only be reopened from inside my house. The backup manual lock ensured no mechanical failures would spoil our trap. Frank's military background proved invaluable during installation. "This is beautiful," he said, testing the remote while the rhythmic sound of our power drill echoed across the property. "She'll drive right into her own prison cell." But the real masterpiece was our media strategy. Maria's daughter Jessica worked for Channel 7 News and agreed to cover the community barbecue as a human interest story. She'd be filming when the gate closed and arrests began, turning Karen's public humiliation into live television. "The key is timing," Jessica explained during our final planning session. "I'll be rolling live when everything hits the fan. Karen's meltdown will go viral within hours." Frank coached me on staying calm during confrontation, using legal phrases that would sound authoritative on camera. "Remember, you're not the aggressor," he said. "You're a property owner defending constitutional rights against criminal trespassers. Let Karen lose her mind while you maintain dignity and legal high ground." The night before the barbecue, I sat on my porch reviewing our preparations while the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted across my soon-to-be battlefield. Every detail planned, every contingency covered, every piece of evidence organized for maximum legal devastation. The irony was exquisite. Karen had spent months trying to force me into HOA submission through harassment, theft, and intimidation. Now she was about to commit multiple felonies in front of 400 witnesses and live television, creating enough evidence to destroy her career and send her to federal prison. The taste of anticipation mixed with Maria's lingering coffee aroma as I realized tomorrow wouldn't just be Karen's downfall. It would be a masterclass in how one person with patience, preparation, and proper documentation could defeat an entire corrupt system. Karen thought she was hosting a neighborhood barbecue that would establish her dominance over my property rights. What she was actually orchestrating was the most spectacular public self-destruction in suburban history, broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is just handing your enemy a shovel and watching them dig their own grave on live television. Karen's final week before the barbecue marked her complete descent from petty tyrant into dangerous criminal. What started as calculated harassment had devolved into desperate, sloppy felonies that would make any prosecutor's career. Monday night at 11:47 p.m., motion sensors triggered as Karen crept around my house like a suburban cat burglar. Security cameras captured her testing my back door with actual lock-picking tools, then attempting to pry open my workshop window when the door wouldn't budge. The metallic scraping of tools against window frames echoed across my property as she desperately tried to break into my home. When floodlights activated, she fled like a vampire caught in sunlight, but not before cameras captured her license plate and a perfect facial shot. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass, attempted burglary. Karen was gift-wrapping felony charges with each panicked move. My strategic response was elegant. Let her continue digging while I documented everything. I called Frank to witness the security footage, ensuring proper chain of custody for evidence that would hold up in federal court. Tuesday brought an escalation that shocked even Frank's seasoned police sensibilities. Karen hired private investigator Martinez to find dirt on me, hoping to discover blackmail material or ammunition for public character assassination. Martinez quit after one day and actually called to warn me. "Lady, I've never seen anything like this," he said over the phone. "Your neighbor wanted me to go through your garbage, follow your daily routine, photograph visitors. When I said that was stalking, not investigation, she offered to triple my fee. I don't work for psychopaths." The fact that a professional investigator considered Karen's requests criminally obsessive spoke volumes about her mental deterioration. Wednesday through Friday brought the bribery escalation that would seal her criminal fate. Karen appeared at my door with progressively larger cash envelopes, $1,000 Wednesday, $2,500 Thursday, $5,000 Friday, each time offering to rent my property for her unauthorized barbecue. I recorded every interaction through my doorbell camera, each conversation showing Karen becoming more frantic and offering increasingly suspicious money. The recordings proved criminal bribery and demonstrated consciousness of guilt. She knew her plans were illegal and was desperately trying to purchase my silence. But Karen's most damaging mistake came Friday night when she completely lost emotional control, calling my phone 23 times between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. Each voicemail escalated from pathetic pleading to rage-filled threats that federal prosecutors dream about. The final message was pure prosecutorial gold. "If you sabotage our barbecue, I'll make sure you regret buying property here. I have connections in real estate, banking, and city government. Cross me, and you'll find yourself dealing with problems you never imagined. This is your last warning." Criminal intimidation, terroristic threats, abuse of official position, all recorded in Karen's own voice with legal timestamp evidence. Frank listened to the recording while the smell of his black coffee filled my kitchen, shaking his head in amazement. "Jake, this woman just confessed to felony intimidation while threatening to abuse official connections for personal revenge. She's buried herself so deep that Clarence Darrow couldn't save her." My counterpunch was surgical. I immediately forwarded copies of all recordings to the district attorney's office with a formal criminal complaint. By Saturday morning, Karen would wake up to active felony investigations on multiple fronts. The community intimidation campaign reached peak desperation Thursday when Karen organized an emergency HOA meeting about neighborhood security threats. She pressured residents to sign petitions demanding my cooperation, threatening that property values would collapse if her barbecue was canceled. The smell of fear, sweat, and desperation hung in the evening air as Karen went door to door, becoming increasingly unhinged with each rejection. When elderly Mrs. Sage politely declined to sign, Karen screamed that antisocial neighbors were destroying community harmony and putting everyone's investments at risk. Then came the mini-twist that destroyed any remaining sympathy for Karen. She attempted to recruit children as surveillance assets. Friday afternoon, she approached 10-year-old Tommy Martinez while he walked his dog, offering him $20 to keep an eye on the mean neighbor's activities and report back to her. Using children for espionage crossed every possible line of human decency and added child endangerment to her expanding criminal portfolio. Tommy's parents were furious and immediately called both Frank and me. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was predatory behavior that threatened neighborhood children's safety. My final strategic move was perfect timing. I arranged for Tommy's parents to file a formal police report Friday evening, ensuring active criminal investigations would be underway when Karen's barbecue began Saturday morning. By Friday night, Karen had transformed from annoying HOA president into a genuine menace to community safety. Her behavior had become so erratic that even loyal board members were publicly distancing themselves, and several residents had started emergency proceedings to remove her from office. The taste of complete victory mixed with genuine concern as I realized tomorrow's barbecue wouldn't just destroy her criminal enterprise, it would be the public psychological breakdown of someone who'd lost all connection to reality in pursuit of absolute control. Saturday morning arrived like the opening scene of a disaster movie, with Karen orchestrating her own spectacular downfall while genuinely believing she was about to achieve total victory. 7:15 a.m. brought the first catering truck rumbling down our quiet residential street, diesel exhaust already creating a haze in the summer heat. I watched through my kitchen window, coffee steam warming my face, as Karen emerged from her Escalade wearing a crisp white pantsuit that screamed, "I'm about to conquer something important today." She marched toward my locked gate like Napoleon approaching Moscow, completely convinced that victory was inevitable. "Come on through," she shouted to the bewildered catering crew, waving them forward like she owned every blade of grass on my property. When drivers hesitated, pointing at the obviously private property signs, Karen's mask began its final slip. She stormed to my front door and began hammering with the fury of someone who'd never been denied anything in her entitled life. The sound of her fists against reinforced wood echoed through the morning air like gunshots, mixing with growing confusion from catering staff who couldn't access their setup location. "Jake, stop this childish behavior and open your gate," she screamed loud enough for Channel 7's news crew to capture every unhinged syllable. "You're embarrassing yourself and everyone knows you're just being difficult." I recorded everything through my doorbell camera while staying safely inside, letting Karen's public meltdown document itself. The sweet smell of morning honeysuckle contrasted sharply with the bitter aroma of Karen's desperation as she continued her tantrum for gathering neighbors to witness. 8:30 brought the locksmith gambit that proved Karen had learned absolutely nothing from previous failures. She returned with professional locksmith Rodriguez, claiming she needed emergency access for a legitimate community event. Rodriguez, weathered by years of property disputes, asked the obvious question, "Ma'am, I need proof of ownership or legal authorization before touching this lock." Karen brandished her HOA documents like sacred scripture, claiming Community Property Management Authority over my private land. When I appeared with actual property deed and title insurance, Rodriguez packed his tools with obvious disgust. "Lady, I don't know what scam you're running," he announced loud enough for Jessica's cameras to capture, "but this man owns his property fair and square. Call me again with false authorization, and I'm reporting you to police." The mini twist came when Karen's desperation drove her to commit perjury by calling 911, claiming I was illegally blocking community property and holding neighborhood event hostage through intimidation. She actually believed her delusions enough to summon law enforcement to arrest me for protecting my own land. 2 patrol officers arrived within 10 minutes, and my counterpunch was beautifully simple: complete cooperation with law enforcement while Karen dug her hole deeper. I provided survey maps, deed records, tax receipts, and title insurance, overwhelming documentation of lawful ownership. Karen argued with officers like they were her personal servants, demanding they force me to open community property for legitimate HOA business. Her voice crescendoed into hysteria as she lectured police about HOA authority superseding individual property rights. "Ma'am," Officer Williams said with saint-like patience, "this gentleman legally owns his property. You're attempting criminal trespass. Cancel your event and find legal venue space." Instead of rational retreat, Karen launched into a public tirade about antisocial property hoarding and selfish neighbors destroying community harmony, giving officers front row seats to her complete psychological breakdown. That's when the charter buses began their magnificent arrival. 10:30 brought buses 1 through 3 rumbling down residential streets like military vehicles invading suburbia. Each bus carried 45 confused passengers expecting accessible barbecue facilities, creating the most beautiful traffic disaster in HOA history. The acrid smell of overheated diesel engines mixed with rising summer temperatures as buses 4 through 10 followed in formation, creating gridlock that blocked emergency access for 6 blocks. 400 people poured onto public streets, demanding answers about the inaccessible venue. Parents wrestling cranky children in 90-degree heat, elderly residents requiring assistance, disabled attendees promised accessible facilities, all suffering because Karen had systematically lied about property access rights. Karen strutted among the chaos like Cleopatra reviewing her troops, giving impromptu speeches about community cooperation and dealing with property extremists, while completely oblivious to confessing criminal trespass on live television. Jessica's news crew captured every moment of Karen's unraveling, the perfect contrast of 400 innocent victims suffering due to one woman's criminal delusions, broadcast in real time to thousands of viewers across the county. By 11:30, street gridlock extended for miles, temperature climbed toward dangerous levels, and Karen was giving television interviews about selfish neighbors while standing directly beneath signs marking my land as private property. The stage was set for the most spectacular public downfall in suburban history, and Karen had personally directed every scene of her own destruction while confessing to multiple felonies on live television. Perfect justice was 60 seconds away, 11:45 a.m. The moment of perfect justice arrived with cinematic timing and the dramatic precision of a master chess player delivering checkmate. I emerged from my house carrying the gate remote like a conductor's baton, walking with the calm confidence of someone who'd orchestrated every note of this symphony of revenge. 400 confused faces turned toward me in unison, the crowd falling silent except for the distant rumble of idling bus engines and the desperate prayers of overheated elderly residents. Karen spotted me first, her face exploding with triumphant vindication. "Finally!" she shrieked, her voice carrying that shrill edge of someone tasting victory. "See? I told you he'd be reasonable. Sometimes you just have to be firm with difficult people." The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with barbecue smoke from inaccessible catering trucks as I approached the gate, Jessica's news cameras capturing every step of what would become the most viral HOA destruction in internet history. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the sweltering crowd, "I understand you're here for a barbecue on my private property. Unfortunately, HOA President Karen Windham organized this event without my permission, signature, or any legal authority." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I raised my hand for silence. However, I don't want innocent people to suffer because of criminal trespass and fraud, so I'm going to let everyone inside. Buses, catering trucks, everyone. Consider yourselves my invited guests. I clicked the remote, and the electronic gate swung open with a satisfying mechanical whir that sounded like freedom itself. The crowd erupted in grateful cheers as buses began rolling onto my property like liberating forces entering occupied territory. All 10 charter buses drove through and parked in my front pasture, followed by catering trucks finally able to access their equipment. 400 people flooded onto my land, immediately seeking shade under oak trees and relief at outdoor water spigots. Karen strutted across my property like Napoleon entering Paris, directing caterers with imperial authority and posing for photos like she'd personally negotiated this diplomatic triumph. She gave multiple interviews to Jessica's camera crew about community cooperation prevailing and firm leadership overcoming antisocial behavior. "Property owners have responsibilities to their communities," Karen declared, completely oblivious to confessing criminal harassment on live television. "I'm proud we found a reasonable solution through persistence and proper authority." For exactly 30 minutes, I let the barbecue proceed normally. Children played, elderly residents found comfortable seating, families enjoyed food in the shade of my trees. Karen basked in apparent victory, giving interviews and directing activities like she owned every blade of grass. At precisely 12:15 p.m., I approached Jessica's camera crew with a wireless microphone, my moment of perfect justice finally at hand. "I hope everyone is enjoying the barbecue on my private 15-acre property," I began, my voice carrying across the suddenly attentive crowd. "Property that HOA President Karen Windham claimed without permission, signature, or any legal authority whatsoever." Dead silence fell like a curtain. I produced the evidence folder that would end Karen's reign forever. "Miss Windham has embezzled $31,847 from your HOA funds through fraudulent contractor bills and unauthorized payments to her side business. She's also used her official position to extort real estate commissions through systematic intimidation." Karen's face drained of color as I continued. "She's committed criminal trespass, fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of official authority, all documented with video evidence and financial records." "That's lies! You can't—" Karen lunged for the microphone, her composure finally shattering. "Thank you for that outburst," I said calmly, stepping back, "because now comes my favorite part." I walked toward the gate control panel with the measured pace of an executioner approaching the scaffold, savoring every step while 400 faces watched in growing realization. "Since you're all here on my private property without permission, you're now technically trespassing. In Texas, property owners can legally detain trespassers until police arrive." I held up the remote control like a weapon of mass destruction. "So here's my mic drop moment, Karen." Click. The electronic gate locked with a cold metallic snap that echoed across my property like the sound of justice itself. 400 faces turned toward the sealed exit in perfect synchronization, reality dawning like nuclear sunrise. Bus drivers frantically tried starting engines, but the gate remained immovable. Karen sprinted to the fence in designer heels, pulling desperately at the electronic mechanism while screaming incoherently. "Congratulations, Karen," I announced to the live television audience. "You just confessed to multiple felonies in front of 400 witnesses while trespassing on property you tried to steal. Officer Williams is already here to begin arrests." The taste of absolute victory mixed with summer heat as Karen collapsed against the locked gate, her empire crumbling in real time while broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Perfect justice delivered with electronic precision and maximum public humiliation. The handcuffs clicking around Karen's wrists created the sweetest symphony I'd heard in months, even more satisfying than my gate locking shut. Officer Williams arrested her on live television for criminal trespass, fraud, and harassment while Jessica's camera crew captured every moment of her spectacular breakdown. Karen screamed about property rights extremists and illegal detention as officers led her away, designer heels scraping against gravel in a sound that became neighborhood legend. Justice moved swiftly once the evidence was public. Within 48 hours, the district attorney filed felony charges: embezzlement, criminal trespass, fraud, terroristic threats, and abuse of official authority. Karen's real estate license vanished overnight. The HOA board unanimously voted her removal and authorized complete forensic auditing of every financial record from her 9-year reign of terror. The civil lawsuit delivered poetic justice. Texas theft statutes allowed triple damages, meaning Karen owed $95,441 in restitution. Her desperate plea bargain included 18 months probation, full financial repayment, 200 hours community service, and a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with me or any Willowbrook residents. But watching our community heal was the real victory. Randy became HOA president on a transparency platform, implementing monthly financial reports and independent audits. New bylaws required board approval for expenditures over $200 and established resident oversight committees with genuine authority. I donated my entire settlement to create the Willowbrook Community Justice Fund, providing legal assistance for HOA abuse victims across Texas. The fund helped 12 families in year one, with Frank and me consulting on documentation strategies that actually work. We learned that the best defense against bureaucratic bullies is preparation, patience, and organized community resistance. The personal relationships that emerged were worth more than any financial victory. Maria became my honorary neighborhood grandmother, bringing Cuban coffee and tamales every Tuesday while sharing stories that made my workshop smell like family. Derek and Emma named me godfather to baby Sophia, and their son Tommy still brings math homework to my workbench every Thursday, filling the space with the sound of pencils scratching and young minds growing. Frank partnered with me to launch Property Rights Defense, consulting for homeowners fighting HOA corruption statewide. We've helped 127 families with a 93% success rate, proving that documented evidence and community solidarity can defeat any petty tyrant. Bobby Kellerman's monthly veterans barbecues transformed my property into a healing space for former military families dealing with civilian bureaucracy. The aroma of properly grilled burgers now mixes with stories of service and sacrifice, creating bonds stronger than any HOA covenant. Our story's ripple effects exceeded every expectation. The video went viral with 2.3 million views and national news coverage. I received over 400 emails from HOA victims nationwide, and our documentation methods are now used by homeowner rights organizations in 12 states. Texas legislature passed the Willowbrook Act, strengthening HOA financial oversight and criminalizing abuse of authority. 3 other HOA presidents resigned after similar audits revealed corruption, and prosecutors created dedicated task forces for HOA crimes. Uncle Eddie's conservation dream became reality beyond my imagination. 8 acres of native Texas wildlife preserve now partners with the Audubon Society for educational programs, bringing hundreds of children to learn about natural ecosystems. The Memorial Butterfly Garden honors Eddie's memory while creating space where families discover that nature heals what human conflict damages. Our annual Freedom Festival has grown from neighborhood barbecue to county celebration, drawing 800 visitors who come to hear stories about defeating corruption through community action. The smell of barbecue smoke now carries memories of victory instead of harassment, and children play where Karen once plotted her campaigns of intimidation. 1 year later, Willowbrook exemplifies what communities can become. 0 harassment complaints, crime down 23%, property values up 12%. The new HOA operates with complete transparency, and residents actually anticipate monthly meetings focused on genuine improvement rather than petty power games. Most importantly, we proved that principled resistance works. Karen's 9-year tyranny crumbled in 6 months through strategic documentation and alliance building. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's building something beautiful from the ashes of corruption and sharing those lessons with others fighting similar battles. The evening air still carries jasmine's scent through my workshop window, but now it smells like freedom earned through courage and community. Uncle Eddie would be proud that his gift became the foundation for defeating suburban tyranny and creating lasting positive change. Share your HOA nightmare story below. I read every comment and help families fight back legally. Subscribe to Karen Stories for more underdog victories where corruption gets crushed and communities grow stronger.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.